Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 8th of December 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me in the studio.
Delighted to be here, Brian.
Thank you. And we're also very pleased to have Sandi Adams and Diane Rasmussen joining us by video link. Now, I'm just going to say it's a cold, wet, somewhat dismal day here in Plymouth. The news, as always in UK, is fairly heavy, but we're going to stay with a sense of humour. And after all, it's supposed to be that wonderful season leading to Christmas, and we're going to try and keep a sparkle in our eyes as we discuss some of the horrors going on in UK. Today, we're going to be having a look really at the Fornethy verdict, Fornethy child abuse affecting thousands of young girls up in Scotland, but it also interfaces with what the government says it's trying to do with child protection at the moment. So there's some interesting nuances there. Ben's going to be having a look at COVID crimes and Operation Tala. Essentially, this is around crimes that did take place during COVID and the lockdown, but now what's coming to light is UK police controlled to make sure that they toe the government line rather than investigate crime. Sandi Adams is also going to be following through with a look at the police, and this will come in from the angle of devolution and the increasing power of mayors, and it's also coupled, of course, with the arrangement of local authorities, where we're seeing the smaller local authorities being drawn into these super councils and super cities. I'm going to be taking a little look at ChatGPT. I asked a question about the trans agenda and was really surprised about what AI had to tell me. And we'll be ending the news today with a look by Diane at the LGBT agenda. And Ben, you've got some comment to make on left-wing policies. So I think this is going to be pretty interesting news. Thank you to everybody for joining us wherever you are in the world. Now, this was the newspaper article that caught my eye earlier this morning. It's the Daily Telegraph. The headline is the important thing. Don't take any notice of the man celebrating his Formula One win, I think that was. But the headline we're interested in is right-wingers branded a danger to children. So once again, we can see child protection powers and organisations coming into the frame to be used to control what people think. And of course, the inference is that if you think right-wing, you're in trouble. Now, on screen, we've got the BBC headline from 2012. The BBC, one of a number of organisations, including, of course, the UK column, that pointed out the disgraceful situation where a UKIP couple, a couple that supported UKIP, had their foster children taken away directly because of their political views. So this is the reality of UK. So-called child protection systems and organisations are actually being used not to protect the children, but to clamp down on political beliefs and political support, which is immensely dangerous. And remember, of course, that as jury trials are smashed to pieces under the Leveson report and Lammy's latest initiatives. While that's happening, we've got the precedent of star chambers, family courts with just a single judge. So, Diane, I'm going to use that as an introduction to your segment here on Fornethy. The verdict came out a few days ago. The women really, really distressed at what the final result was.
Yes, thanks, Brian, and hello, everyone. It's great to be here today. Yes, I wanted to report on this Fornethy residential school case, which UK Column has been covering for a number of years now. I attended court both on one day of the witness testimonies back in October, and I attended last week for the sentencing hearing. Just for those of you who may not be familiar with the case, this has been a residential school, which was an operation under Glasgow Corporation and then Strathclyde Regional Council for the years between 1960 and 1991. And the women were abused in all ways possible when they were primary school age. They were from Glasgow and taken up into a very remote area of Scotland, away from their families, and held under the control and the under the state. So they were not in the custody of their parents at the time, which means that there's responsibility through Glasgow Corporation for everything that happened there, and now Glasgow City Council. This teacher, Patricia Robertson or Baxter, was convicted of 18 counts of what they call cruel and unnatural treatment at the High Court Glasgow back in October, and she received her sentencing back in Wednesday last week when I was there. And I will just say that the initial response was shocking. That's the word I can use that's more accurate than anything else. And this is because she only received, despite abusing several girls, convicted of 18 different girls in this trial, and obviously many more over 14 years between ending around 1984, starting in 1969. She had 18 charges of what they called cruel and unnatural treatment of these youngsters when they were primary school age. So I've spoken with 3 women immediately following receiving the sentencing hearing. So I just want to go through 3 videos and we can just hear and see what they went through and how they experienced it. So first, we'd like to speak with Sharon Cruden, who was one of the interviews that Brian has done previously with the Fornethy survivors.
I'm disgusted. She never showed any remorse. She denies everything. Not even to apologise to any of us. 3 years probation, what is that? That's nothing compared to what she's done to all these women. And there's more out there. It's just ridiculous.
What do you think about how the judge approached it? Because he seemed to admit and say that her crimes were terrible, and then he gave her probation. I was expecting him to say, we're sending you to prison.
Yeah, I thought that at first as well. I just thought it was going to go in our favour, for a conviction, for a sentence, but obviously not. So I just don't understand it. I don't. Just because of her age. She's able to have lived her life up to now quite normally, whereas all the victims have had some sort of impact in their life due to her abuse. So it's not fair. It's just not fair.
So as we've heard from, this was really actually very disgusting. I should clarify that the sentence was technically 3 years probation, which means that she can't go out between, I believe, the hours of 3 p.m. and midnight. She has to stay at home. She can't teach children anymore, which is kind of ridiculous since she's 77 years old and has been retired for several years. She also has to pay compensation to the 18 victims, which is £18,000 within the next couple of months. And the women that I spoke to who received those, who would receive those £1,000 said they don't even want that, because to them that was just an absolute insult. When we talked in the interview with Sharon, we talked about what Lord Colbeck said, where he was sort of leading up to saying, well, this was, absolutely terrible what you did to the women, speaking directly to Patricia Robertson, that the girls were badly treated. This was over several years. This was very long-term abuse. And so we were all expecting, as we led into it, that there was going to be some element of, well, maybe she'll get sent to prison, but she didn't get it. They were saying that it was because it was like her first conviction, and therefore they would go a little bit more lightly based on what they could do within the scope of what was available to them, according to Judge Lord Colbeck. So let's hear from another lady. This next one is Carol White.
I think it's completely wrong. I think she should have been sent to prison. Fornethy Residential School was a prison to those young girls that went. It's not gave any survivors any hope. Survivors should have had hope. Today we should have walked out knowing that she got a conviction. She should be going to prison right now, and she's walking free. She should be sharing the same oxygen as us.
3 years probation and £1,000 for each charge. So that's £18,000. 3 years for years of abuse.
Abuse, that was terrible. That the abuse that we suffered.
Of course it was.
She should not be getting away with it. She should be doing time for that, and she should spend the rest of her life in prison.
I really thought the way the judge was speaking that he was about to put her in prison, because he talked about how horrible it was and then he gave her probation.
Yes, the judge spoke about the impact it had on the people that were abused by her, and what she done to them, and she showed no remorse on the social work reports at all.
No.
And yet she's still walking free. She should not be walking free. Is there not some way that we can appeal against this or something?
So following what Carol just said in her interview with me, what happened was, and we found out in the sentencing hearing, and she said this throughout, that Patricia Robinson herself did not believe that she did anything wrong. And she actually blamed the women, saying that they were trying to gain financially from taking her all the way up into this trial, which, of course, was something that made them understandably even more angry than they already were. The third clip that I have here is from Lynn Sheeran.
It's an absolute disgrace that we've waited 50 years for this, and we've waited around 50 years, and she's just been handed a 3-year probation and told to pay 18 victims £1,000. £1,000 is what our innocence cost for being abused, beaten up, force fed, sexual abuse, you name it. We went through it at her hands, and she walks away. She gets to serve Christmas with her family and sit and eat turkey and whatever, while we sit and ponder over the last 50 years what we went through with that at hands of that woman. It's an absolute joke. I don't know what else to say. Just fume, full of emotion.
I am too, I understand. It was amazing to me. It sounded the way he was talking, the judge was about to put her into prison, but
I
he
thought
couldn't.
at one point that she was going to get a custodial sentence.
Because he talked about how terrible the crimes were and how awful she was and how she showed no remorse. And then he put her into probation. Just absolute shocking.
I can't even think. I can't even. My thoughts are in my own right now.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Now, in addition to this sentence of probation, something to point out is that she was not found guilty of any of the most serious charges that were brought against her. There were 25 charges brought against her. She was found guilty of 18. The others were not proven. And these were the sexual abuse charges. So, of course, those would have been the most serious, but those were not proven. At the time when she first received the conviction of these 18 counts of being guilty, the women were actually very happy because they felt as though they were receiving justice and that finally they had been heard and something would happen. And so, but now, of course, with just the probation for abusing girls for 14 or 15 years over this amount of time and the severity of the abuse, they're now obviously, as we've just seen in those clips, very angry. But we will come back to Lynn Sheeran at the end of this report. What I want to talk about now is the mainstream media responses to covering this. So I was sitting in the press area in the courtroom with all of the mainstream reporters, and all of them were there. Here's one from the BBC saying retired teacher sentenced for abusing girls at residential school. And what we're seeing here is that we're seeing a lot of emphasis on just this one teacher. The reason for that is because she was the one brought to trial, but she's also the only one that they believe is still alive of the former staff that were responsible. The head teacher, she's been dead now for a couple of years, who was the last one in control of Fornethy Residential School, and they can't find any of the other teachers or staff, and they believe that they've all passed away. So this lady at 77 is the last one that they could find. Gone for some more mainstream headlines. STV News was there. Former teacher guilty of historical abuse of girls at Fornethy House avoids jail. This has irritated me constantly as the main researcher who's been doing a lot of the work on what was going on and finding out the background of the institution. It was called Fornethy Residential School when they were there, not Fornethy House. That was the name of the building as originally built back in around 1918. So the issue here was that we actually could not we use this over and over again ourselves for UK Column, but we see Fornethy House over and over again, which was not correct because that sort of takes away from the fact that this was in fact a residential school where they were placed into a residential institution, and that was meant to be their school, even though they didn't receive any schooling, according to the women who remember what happened when they were there. Here's the next one from all of the sort of the live, Yorkshire Live, Glasgow Live. We see the similar headlines from this is sort of a nationwide outlet. Retired Fornethy teacher dodges jail for sadistic abuse of young schoolgirls. So again, what this is doing is it's covering up the systemic abuse that happened in this place over 31 years, including at the establishment level. Some of the previous reporting that has happened through UK Column in the past few years has been that there's been suggestions, and we don't have entire evidence of this, but there seems to be memories of sex parties through the establishment, potentially Nicholas Fairbairn, which is on the UK Column website, although potentially Jimmy Savile, who of course did own a house in Scotland, and others. But of course, we have no evidence of this, but the women certainly do remember being drugged and taken into these parties and smelling alcohol and remembering sexual activity from these pedophiles that may have been there according to the memories that they have. Here's another one, Daily Record, similar thing. Evil teacher who tortured little girls at Fornethy School spared jail. Once again, we're calling this evil. We can't do anything about the other teachers. We don't have any coverage of the other teachers. We're just seeing this word evil. So no one really knows what's going on there beyond this one woman. So we're placing the blame on one woman. Daily Record says woman battered and force-fed by evil teachers. There's that word evil again. Slams decision not to send her to jail. This is talking to Sharon Cruden in this article, who we just saw in the interview that I did with her. See again, decision not to jail evil Fornethy House of Horrors teacher to be probed by Crown. So now the Crown is saying they're going to do an investigation into why or whether or not she can be jailed, sort of appealing the decision because of the extent of the abuse, according to all of the evidence and according to the number of the charges that were put out there and made available. Brian, do you have any questions for me at this point about what I saw at the day in the 2 different days I was in court, or about the sentencing hearing at this point that you would like to know about?
Diane, I don't have direct questions, but I would like to make a comment. As I've watched this tragic story unfold, it seems to me obvious that delay and more delay has been the technique used by the establishment to draw the thing out. This to me seems to be deliberate. It seems that the investigation, if there has been a full investigation by Police Scotland, has in fact been very limited. And as you've just mentioned, they didn't get their noses into these reports of much serious sexual abuse of little girls who were at the Fornethy school. And ultimately, we've come out with this very lenient sentence, and we've had very little mainstream reporting. Now, I can't say that this is a cover-up because we just don't have the evidence to put that on the table. But is it something that comes into my mind? Deliberate delay, a really weak investigation by Police Scotland, and then you pin everything onto one very elderly member of staff who becomes the sole focus of being a bit cruel to the girls. This to me seems a cynical cover-up by the establishment, but that's just my personal opinion.
No, absolutely, Brian. I would agree with you there, considering what I have found and UK Column as an organization has found in our last few years of research and reporting and working directly with the women. We know that there is much more to this story than one elderly woman who, was not nice according to the charges of the force feeding and the, sort of the forced behaviors. We're not saying that was good at all. And of course, women have horrible memories and lots of trauma from this, but we know that it was much bigger than this over 30 years. I would encourage people to look at our reporting. We have an entire portion on our website dedicated to all of the interviews and articles and news reports that we've done for Fornethy Residential School over the past few years. So that link will be in the show notes to be able to see all of these reports in one place. And just to say that we have developed a good relationship, both working on a friendship with these leaders of this group over the years. This was me the night before the sentencing hearing. This was last Tuesday evening in Glasgow. I had dinner with Lynn Sheeran and Sharon Cruden, who we just heard from, who have been 2 of the amazing, strong, brave leaders through this group over the past few years, and I've got to know them as friends as well as survivors. And so we had a nice meal the evening before. And I just want to end the segment with the second half of Lynn Sheeran's interview and what she had to say about UK Column and the work we've been doing with them.
This is definitely not the end. This is the beginning for us. So the fight on will get harder and stronger So you can see a lot of women here today.
Yeah, there's a lot of women here. The court was packed.
Anger and emotion, so it's just, I don't know, we'll go now and we'll decide what we're going to do next.
And I'll be here with you. UK Column will always be with you. We'll be here.
All the way. For all the support from Brian, everybody, and you for making this journey. It's just, I think you can call them. We've needed you and they've been there for us every time.
And we will remain here as long as you need us.
Yeah.
Thank you. We love you.
You too.
So very nice thing to end on there. We've developed relationships with these women over the years. It has not been easy for any of us, but I just want to say, just with anything else that we do through UK Column, we will always be there as long as I said, as long as they need us, and we will never abandon anyone who comes to us for help, Brian. And I'm sure you agree with that.
If we've got the capacity to do it, that's something we have to say for our viewers. But yes, in principle, thank you for that, Diane. Well, I've suggested that something was not right in the investigation of Fornethy. Were the police controlled to go at the pace they did or do as little as they did? Perhaps we can look at another Operation Teller around COVID.
Yes.
Where, Ben, I think you've got some real evidence on control of the police.
Well, absolutely, yes. And you talk about the pace of investigation. Well, it seems the police have found a new way of dealing with avoiding accountability, which is just to not investigate at all and to refuse to accept evidence. And this is referring to some actual police work that's been done over the past couple of years now by this gentleman, who is a retired police officer, Mark Sexton. People will probably be familiar with Mark, actually. If you're a viewer of the UK Column, if you're interested in what's happening around COVID issues in the UK, in June 2021, he notoriously reported Nadeem Zahawi, who was then running the vaccine programme, for misconduct in public office. And then 6 months later, January 2022, he reported a criminal case to Hammersmith Police, provided 400 victim, witness, and expert and whistleblower statements relating to vaccine harms caused by the vaccine programme. He alleged gross negligent manslaughter and serious misconduct in public office against a number of political figures. That was accepted, and it was assigned a crime reference number, importantly, which we had up there on the screen a moment ago. And there was quite a lot of buzz at the time about the fact that this had got into the system. People will probably remember that. Now, Mark and a team have continued this work. It is exceptional work, and we're going to get into some of what they've been doing. It's via this organisation. It's called Ethical Approach. We'll provide a link that you can go and have a look at their website. And just a couple of weeks ago, 18th of November, they issued this public statement relating to what they call serious constitutional failings undermining the rule of law with bearing on national security and matters of overwhelming public interest. There are 5 components to this. The first one relates to the Hammersmith crime report and the crime number, and the evidence proving that that was never fully investigated in accordance with statutory duties. Case in point being that not one of the victims, witnesses or whistleblowers was contacted out of 400 that are in the case file. The second point being that the closure of that investigation was itself unlawful, and that amounts to perverting the course of justice, misconduct in public office, assisting offenders, and a bunch of other offences. The third point, as we'll come on to in more detail in a moment, is this issue of something called Operation Teller and the Spears Directive, and the fact that a national command structure had been implemented and was being used to control police activity across the whole of the UK. And they have overwhelming evidence, as I see it, to back this up. Right? And this explains a lot about what we were seeing happening and the inaction of police on the ground. And it completely overlaps with Charles's experience as well, Charles Mallet, and he's written about this. And I think he's going to talk about this later in the week and potentially over the coming weeks as well. And this all amounts to what they describe as constitutional collapse, essentially. I mean, I think you used the phrase last week, Brian, that we have no law. And I think that this is more evidence of that. Last week, it was in relation to the fact that government officials can commit crimes. Well, here we've got the police won't accept evidence of crimes. So there's the other side to that coin, I guess, in some ways. And what Sexton and Ethical Approach are demanding is that the record is set straight, and in particular that this issue around police not accepting evidence is addressed, because the COVID inquiry has repeatedly confirmed that criminal conduct falls outside of its remit and that criminal conduct needs to be reported to the police. And when people have done that, the evidence has been refused. Right, which is standing in the way of any kind of constructive investigation happening. All of this was sent to this mob. So we've got the array of the top legal apparatus of the country here. I won't read out all the names, but you can see who we can see on screen here. Mark Rowley from the Met, Lammy, Richard Hermer, Attorney General for England and Wales. They received this. It was sent recorded delivery so that we know that it arrived with them. And what do you think happened, Brian?
Nothing is what I think happened. Nothing.
Yes, it was roundly, let's get that back on screen, ignored. They ignored it completely. So 2 weeks later, you gave them a bit of breathing space. Have a look at this. Come back to us. No response. So Mark Sexton and team have issued this second letter, which is the evidence supplemental to constitutional correspondence issued on the 18th of November. And essentially the summary of this is that the system now appears designed not to protect the public from harm, but to protect the system from the public, which sounds about right to me, actually. I think that that's pretty much...
Straight quote, spot on.
Yeah, indicative of everything that we talk about on a weekly basis. And essentially what we're looking at here is the idea that the police showed no independent professional curiosity in determining whether serious criminal offences have been committed in this period of time. The only consistent tactic used was to shut every report down and prevent crime numbers from being issued, to stop this stuff from getting into the system. This was all being controlled centrally by the National Police Chiefs Council, something called Gold Command, which is the top level of gold, silver and bronze command structure that was put in place around Operation Tala. And essentially this is not independent policing. It is policing functioning as an extension of the executive government establishment operating to shield itself. Right, we've got a short clip now of Mark Sexton introducing the body of evidence.
It's all there. We said we'd make it available. Here it is. There's no denying it. It's not conspiracy theory. It's not tin-foil hat-wearing lunacy. It's not far-right propaganda. It's not made up. This is all factual. It's all evidenced. It's their evidence. It's their replies. It's their FOIs. It's their statements that they gave to the COVID inquiry. It's all of our interaction. It's fully documented with emails and with videos and newspaper links. It's undeniable. They committed serious crimes. They prevented the people of the UK from seeking remedy and redress as victims of crime. Thousands and thousands of people have been let down. This is disgusting, it's unlawful, unconstitutional, and they have committed very serious crimes in public office across the board.
We'll provide a link to the full body of evidence. It is overwhelming. Right, and an incredible piece of work. And I should just say, if we're going to have a police force in this country, and I think we probably should, then it needs people like Mark Sexton in it, because this is an extremely comprehensive piece of investigation. There's loads of evidence, loads of items. It's all very methodically put together. There are a couple that jumped out at me that we're going to show you now. The first one is this video clip showing police on the ground refusing to accept evidence under a directive from someone called Alan Spears.
On both occasions, we're wanting to hand in very serious witness statements.
Is this papers in relation to vaccinations?
Yes. No, it's
no. This is what the appointment's about.
No, but more than that. More than that.
Alan Spears, listen to me. Assistant Chief Constable Alan Spears has issued instructions to the Police Service of Scotland that we are not to take any requests of this matter. We are not to deal with it. Okay, that is the official police.
Who's made that?
Assistant Chief Constable Alan Spears.
Right. Well, when you need to speak to Assistant Chief Constable
Alan Spears.
I've had my instructions from him. Okay?
Wait a minute. One person speaking. Right. Let's make an appointment to speak to the person that's calling the shot, so you're not allowed to accept any witness statements.
Phone 101 and asked to speak to Assistant Chief Constable Alan Spears.
When did they make this?
First, January 2022, he gave that instruction to the whole of Police Scotland, okay, when this first started.
This is witness statements which Alan Burrell asked me to get.
Right.
This is names and addresses.
Well, you're going to have to wait until Sergeant Burrell comes in later.
Can I say, this is witness statements. This is important. This is witness statements from the COVID-19 inquiry. It's from the COVID-19 inquiry.
Can I say, Ben, just astonishing and beautiful, because the evidence is there in our faces as what's going on. But I think I am correct in saying that it's the duty of each individual policeman to investigate crime, and therefore by failing to investigate crime, two police, I think I could see in that video, they are both now complicit in the crime because they failed to take action on their own account.
They were only following orders, Brian.
Yes.
And they were following orders from this guy. Let's get him on screen. So that's Assistant Chief Constable Alan Spears. And that on the right is the Spears Directive, which was issued. This is part of the evidence file. So this has come from an FOI request. And this relates to what he describes as intimidation of staff and volunteers in the vaccine centres, right? So this is how they position it. And he says that should any officer or member of staff be approached or contacted by people requesting assistance in line with any of the above, this supposed intimidation, then these requests should be rejected. While we continue to uphold individuals' rights to freedom of expression and to protest, this must be balanced with the rights of others, keeping the public safe, preventing crime and disorder, and seeking to minimise disruption. And he says, finally, none of the type of behaviour outlined above should be considered as protest activity. So these aren't protests. This is not legitimate protest. Obviously, that would have to relate to BLM or something like that, if you remember what was going on at that period of time. Another piece of evidence from the file was this, which I rather enjoyed. So this came from an initial inquiry from Full Fact, who actually opened their question to the police saying, I am a journalist at Full Fact and I'm getting in touch as I'm looking into the false claims. So they've already established that these are false claims. Apparently they need that to be confirmed. I'm not sure that's journalism. And then further up the email train, they've confirmed that formally recording numbers of we have not been formally recording numbers of attempts. And it would appear that the guidance to not record has been a success. So we've managed to squash this by not investigating crimes properly. This is damning, absolutely damning.
And Full Fact is now drawn into.
Oh, absolutely, yes. I think we should probably get in touch with Full Fact and see what they think about this. I might do that after the news this afternoon. This links, by the way, just to wrap up here, directly back into, by pure coincidence, the past 2 weeks of reporting that I've been doing around this organisation. If you remember the Forward Institute, this sort of common purpose type entity that's appeared, that's overseen by Sir Anthony Saltz, the former exec chairman of Rothschild & Co., and the CEO of this Forward Institute is this guy, Adam Gradecki, who is a World Economic Forum global shaper, their under 30 network, and also as a governor of Arc Academy, working for Paul Marshall. And I spoke last week about Ian Cheshire, his relationship with Charles III. And also, the week before that, I spoke about this chap, Martin Hewitt, CBE, who was the chair of the National Police Chiefs Council during 2019 to 2022, I believe it was, when this whole thing was happening. And you can see a photo of him here. This is back in 2019 at the National Policing Board. And this was where Bojo, back in the Bojo days, the first meeting of the new National Policing Board marks the start of a new partnership between the police and the government.
And he was telling the truth there, because they are working in partnership. They're not working in order to ensure law is operative and enforced.
No separation of powers whatsoever. No. Right? And just, look, that was just 6 months before the whole COVID thing kicked off. I mean, what a coincidence, eh? And that guy Hewitt, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, so he's now running the UK border. So since October 24, he's now the Border Security Commander at the Home Office. So goodness knows what he's up to over there, what he's overseeing and what he's doing and not doing, importantly. Just as a final point, the Operation Talus structure landed with me because I've been reading some stuff over the past few days about Kabbalah systems theory and how this is being used to drive the global transition. And the structure, gold, silver, bronze structure of Operation Tala, led by Martin Hewitt, deployed in this instance, maps perfectly to the cognitive, emotional, behavioural and decision-making action layers of the Kabbalah system theory modelling framework. And I wonder if that's a coincidence too.
I'm sure it's just a coincidence, Ben, but thank you for that really excellent and really concerning report. Now let's bring Sandi Adams in with the news today. Sandi, welcome. And you are taking this a stage further, because whatever Ben has shown the public about control of the police in order to do the government's bidding, there's more of this coming under devolution.
Yes, absolutely. And good afternoon to Brian, Ben and Diane, and indeed everyone. Yes, I mean, over the last few weeks, something quite disturbing has been happening across England, and it hasn't really been picked up much by the mainstream media. And it's about the local council elections that have been cancelled, and some of them have been cancelled till 2028, which is, it's unconstitutional, it's undemocratic. And ministers have announced that the elections in Greater Essex, Norfolk, Suffolk, Hampshire, the Solent and Sussex and Brighton will be held in 2028 rather than 2026, because they were already put back from 2025 to 2026. So the government argued that areas need more time to complete the local government reorganisations before the votes can proceed. Now, this is because they are completely re-engineering the whole structure of governance in the UK. And what they're doing is that they're trying to get ready for, combined authorities and the devolved, the whole devolved, combined and unitary authorities, which then turn into mega regions, which is what we're looking at. So basically, the UK devolution to climate-aligned local authorities is what we're looking at, and how this is being done through the Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, and they're reshaping global governance. So I've got a slide here from the Guardian. And can we have the Guardian slide? Yeah, here we go. And it's really about Richard Tice is there saying that it's cancelling democracy, and the Guardian and obviously Richard Tice agree with that. So, and it is. I mean, we're finding that democracy is literally being cancelled, and this is something that we're seeing a lot now. If I look, if you look at the there's two major acts that galvanise this plan. It's been a very long-term plan. And the first one is the Cities and Communities Act of 2016. And that came in, and I've put all these in the show notes, so do look at them, because you can see clearly how the governance is being structured and taken away from Whitehall and given to these global or metro mayors, as they call them. And the next one is the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Act of last year, 2025. So they devolve power from Whitehall to the regional mayors with governance over transport, housing, planning, net zero infrastructure, energy systems, but most interestingly, police and crime commissioning and fire regulations. Now, why does this matter? Well, it matters because under, UK mayors gain strategic power over net zero and infrastructure. The local governments align with global climate goals, that's the UN and the EU, and power shifts are happening without direct public consent at all. There's no written constitution limits of these changes, and no other countries maintain clearer legal boundaries. And we're the only country that seems to have this oversight. So other countries don't have this. So I'm looking at the moment I've got a slide here from the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners regarding the transfer of police powers from Whitehall to the metro mayors, and it's clear that they are literally handing over the whole of police and crime commissioning from our normal government to these metro mayors. So what we'll see is things like enforcement of clean air zones, low traffic neighbourhoods, through integrated transport police strategy, smart city policing linked to regional digital and data sets. Now, this is where we see, behavioural compliance strategies, nudging and fines, more surveillance, and this is all tied into a regional policy. So we've got crowd control as well, and protest management aligned with Mayor's climate or development agenda. Now, I've got this slide here, which is a map of the Shire mayors and the metro mayors. Now, I don't know if anybody even knew they existed, but what we need to know is the difference between them, because once the mayor gains these police and crime powers, policing becomes part of the wider combined authority ecosystem, which usually includes transport, strategic planning, all those things. And it allows them special powers over everything. So could we have that map back again? Sorry. So the green areas are the metro mayors, and the purple ones are the shires. Now, there's a difference here because the metro mayors are the bigger cities. I think we're looking at places like Manchester. And the rural areas are lagging behind a bit. They've still got authority power through their councils. So what you've got really is this two-tier system, which eventually the rural areas will be catching up. By 2035, they want to absorb the rural areas into the metro mayor's system. So nobody gets away with anything, but it's done very gradually. It's a whole Fabian gradualism thing, and it's been going on for such a long time now, before 2016. So I just want to look now at the Mayors for Climate and Energy, the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. Now, this is where it's all coming from, and the C40 cities, but I'll get onto the C40 cities later. The Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy was formed in 2016 by merging the Compact of Mayors and the European Union's Covenant of Mayors. It's a worldwide coalition of city leaders committed to tackling climate change by pledging to reduce greenhouse and gas emissions. And the initiative highlights the role of cities in climate action. So really, it was launched in 2014 by Ban Ki-moon and Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York. And it unites city mayor networks such as C40 Cities, which is the climate leadership group, ICLEI, and the United Cities and the local governments and the UN Habitat. Now, over 12,500 cities and local governments from 144 countries are involved in this, representing more than 1 billion people. And they've committed to this compact's goals. Now, ICLEI is interesting. It's the International Committee of Local and Environmental Initiatives, and it was created after the Earth Summit in 1992 to bring Agenda 21, which is now Agenda 2030, from global to local. And it was brought into every single town council in the UK just after the Earth Summit in 1992. And that is why we've got all these climate policies. So it's all been a long-term plan. Now, so the Global Covenant came out of the C40 cities. Now, let's have a look at the C40 cities. They are the climate leadership group. It's a network of nearly 100 major cities committed to addressing climate change and advancing the goals of the UN's Agenda 2030, Paris Agreement. So it brings together mayors and city leaders to collaborate on cutting urban emissions. Now, this is all heavily backed by, the Bloomberg Philanthropies, the World Bank. They're all involved. ICLEI, the World Economic Forum, the UN bodies, and the C40 cities pledges to implement policies that align with global targets, climate targets. Now, this is the timeline that they have for this devolution. By 2028, England, mostly operated by 10 to 15 minute powerful metro mayors. And by 2030, the remaining countries are folded into the city region structures. So first of all, you get the metro mayors, and then the shire mayors, as they call them, will be suddenly folded into them over a period of time between 2030 and 2035. And the traditional, the traditional district model becomes redundant. So it's either symbolic or it's phased out entirely. And this will effectively end the shire governance system. So everybody will be under these mayors. Now, this is really worrying, because what it does really, and it will inevitably result not only in convergence of digital mapping and all the things that we don't want and control of the population, it'll also double down on ULEZ fines, surveillance, We've got another side, surveillance and the banning of autonomous forms of heating, like wood-burning stoves, CO2 taxing, retrofitting, and ultimately climate lockdowns. So we've really got to look at this for what it is. I mean, this is all being implemented. It's not local empowerment. It's the mechanism that the UN uses to implement Agenda 2030 and at city region level, bypassing national parliaments. And it fulfills all these goals, the 17 goals, particularly SDG 11, 16, 17, 13, 7, 8, 9. So a lot of the goals. Now, why does this matter? Because the UK mayors gained strategic power over net zero infrastructure. Local governments align with global climate goals from the UN and the EU, and power shifts are happening without direct public consent. There's no written constitution limits to these changes, and other countries maintain clearer legal boundaries and oversight than we do. So this is what we're seeing. We're seeing this overreach, really, in policing police powers, because as soon as we let go of Westminster and these mayors have control over policing, we've lost democracy completely. So,
Sandi, thank you very much, and amazing how that dovetails in with what you were taking us through, Ben. A couple of comments that occurred in our chat box while you were talking, Sandi. One person said one mayor to rule them all, and the other one was talking about fiefdoms, and this, of course, is exactly what it is, a fiefdom under these all-powerful mayors. And the important thing which you've identified is this, of course, is not UK policy. This is coming in from the global governance system, the UN, and the powers above, particularly the financial powers. But we'll continue to stay on the case, and I'm going to say the UK column is unique in putting out the real news that's happening 3 times a week, as opposed to talking about what the state-controlled policy direction is as to what's supposed to be happening. Now, if you like what we do, if you're watching from overseas but you're not fully on board, we need your help to be a paid-up member of UK column to keep us going. We can only, sorry if we just come back one here, we can only do what we do with your financial help, and we do need your subscriptions on a monthly basis to keep us going, more importantly to expand. So if you're not yet a full part of the team, please consider doing that. You can also, of course, make a donation or make a purchase through the shop. That's the website click button to find more information. So please, if you're watching from UK or overseas and you're not yet on board, click that blue button and join us. Now, the material we're putting out is increasing. Tonight, we've got another germ warfare edition with Andrew Kaufman on germ theory versus terrain theory. We've also got the Silk and Steel podcast tonight at 9 p.m. Did the CIA kill Malcolm X over his ties to China? That'll be a fascinating discussion. We've also got Dr. Liz Evans interviewing Dr. David Cartland under the title Do No Harm. Now, of course, David Cartland has had a huge amount of abuse from the system, from speaking out on matters to do with COVID and viruses and matters of health, and he needs a lot of support in order to keep going. This will be a very interesting interview. Now, also very importantly, for Thursday, the 11th, we've got the UK column Skripal and Novichok event, what didn't happen. You can get onto that via Eventbrite. Details are on the UK column website. There are still places available. We're very keen that people in the Salisbury area or environs attend, because, of course, it was a matter that affected them very deeply. So if you've got friends or relations in the area, how about getting them along and making this a very special event? Now, this is Sunday, December the 14th. We've got UK column streaming 9/11 Truth Today. This is having a look at the 9/11 Truth movement and what sort of state it's in the present time. If you go onto the UK column website, you can find full details of how to log into that. And then short time afterwards, the The video of it will be available on the UK Column website as well, but that's a stream that you can join if you go to UK Column. Now, also on Sunday the 14th, I will be joining Common Knowledge, and we'll be having a look at what's happening in the country. I'll be joining by Zoom link, and this is going to be quite an interesting experience, having I hope, a light-hearted chat about where we are in the world. And finally, I just wanted to say in London on Saturday, the 13th of December at 1 p.m, Portland Place, there's a mass and non-compliance protest, I beg your pardon, about digital ID. So that's a very important thing to get along to. Now, let's move on to the subject of AI, something that I regard as very dangerous, but I'm also extremely skeptical about. Of course, it advertises itself as an AI revolution, but I think we should beware that AI revolution. And I just wanted to share with you today very quickly a little bit about my relationship with Chat GPT when I asked a question about the trans agenda. Because it appeared that AI had great difficulty coping with what was really a simple question, because straight away ChatGPT hit me with there's no evidence of any transgender agenda created by a person, group, or organization. The phrase is not a factual or scholarly term. And it basically laid into me for daring to ask about an agenda. Now, the word agenda in my head was a very simple one. I wanted to know what was happening and what the agenda was. But this led to some pretty interesting discussion by this so-called intelligence system. So it began to say what it regarded as true. Transgender identities have existed across cultures and throughout history. And then it got on to the fact that apparently it's not true. What is not true is that there is a central creator or a mastermind or a coordinated agenda trying to impose transgender identities. Now, I rapidly challenged ChatGPT on this because it had told me in an earlier communication that data on the trans agenda really only went back to about 2002, and before that, very little existed. So when I challenged the AI system on how it could make these claims when there was no previous data, it suddenly started to get a bit wobbly. And it told me, to my, I'm going to say delight, you're right. My initial reaction was biased. GPT here reacting and finally coming out and saying that its initial reaction was biased because it is programmed to trigger on language patterns and it doesn't know the intent of a person actually asking questions. So you're really seeing weaknesses of this beast system. And it says, and you are correct, what ChatGPT did happened without knowing anything about my individual views or my intended meaning in asking the question. So this is supposed to be an intelligent system, but what can we discover? Well, first of all, it tried to wriggle out by telling me I'd asked the wrong question, and it then posted really what I should have said, which is I should have used the word policy, because it regarded agenda as having just two meanings, if I can bring you down here: neutral, policy direction agenda, or a conspiratorial agenda, a plot. And this is where the programming of this beast is showing weaknesses straight on. But this was the beauty. It eventually admitted to me that it can show cultural and institutional biases. And this has come about due to its training data, its reinforcement learning examples, the assumptions of my creators, the AI creators, safety rules, And here it starts talking about bias towards avoiding conspiratorial interpretations, bias towards certain respectful language norms, bias towards institutional consensus, bias towards risk-averse interpretations of controversial topics. So the idea that this AI system is not biased, it is happy to tell me itself that indeed it is fully biased. And I'll just run through these last slides very quickly. But it then attempted to get the moral high ground by saying, let me answer your question directly, factually, and without spin. But it had already put spin on the whole dialogue it was having with me. And when I delved into who had actually, who had programmed ChatGPT in order to have the bias, it was very reluctant to tell me. It talked about privately run research lab, and I needed to put a lot of pressure on this system in order to get it to actually tell me who the real people were behind it, and it finally listed the founders, and with more pressure it was happy to tell me where the money came from, and with more pressure it again stressed that it could not claim that its programming was free of bias. And this is the two arguments here. You're right. I cannot know the private intentions, beliefs, or inner thoughts of the people who built or trained me. Beg your pardon, let's just pop back here. And finally, it says, therefore, I cannot claim my programming is perfectly free of bias. So that's the system telling you itself. Contrast that report, sorry, let's just follow through again here, with this report by BBC Sport. Now, this was about nastiness in social media causing problems for Manchester United. And the manager, Rubin said he'd had so much hate on social media, he'd have to sort of take refuge by not watching any of it at all. He also says he doesn't watch the news, and I think he's talking about the BBC News. But if we pop that one back on screen, buried in the BBC article was a little comment here. It says, the analysis in BBC's investigation was conducted with data science company Signify. Now, Signify, I don't think, is a data science company. It's another AI company. And I think it's reasonable to say we can assume it might be as biased as we've seen with ChatGPT. So here's what it has to say, Signify has to say about themselves. It's about issues, not individuals. But this one's for you, Ben, in particular. Our mission for Signify is to show how AI and big data can build social empathy and inspire better products and policies. So this is using AI in order to skew people's beliefs and opinions, to reframe them, to follow the very governmental biases that ChatGPT has declared now fully, has declared to the public at large. A lot more to talk about on that, and we'll deal with some more in UK Column Extra. Diane, let's just bring you in here because I asked about the trans agenda, which is definitely real. You've got a little bit to say on LGBT matters.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I just thought this was an interesting thing to look at. I thank you to this UK Column supporter who sent me this article from Zero Hedge last week that provided links to this report, which is through the group Defending Education, it has been doing a lot of work over in America, although it's the same agenda, trans agenda. All of the agendas are the same pretty much between the two countries when it comes to pushing things like critical race theory, the trans ideology, and diversity, equity, inclusion. So this organization produced this set of handouts that is being distributed through the National Education Association, which is the largest union in America for educators. And this has a range of things, including a pronouns list, which we see here on the screen. It's only got 3 sets of pronouns, which is actually a very small number. If you look at most trans ideology documents in sort of showing school teachers what they should be familiar with and what they should be able to be using. One set of pronouns could be she, they, could be he, they, could be sie, them, sir. And I think, there's, dozens of genders, I think 72 or whatever number they come up with. They all have different sets of pronouns. It's actually quite restrictive based on some things. But when we look further into the handout, which I took some more time to look at, the entire set of training material looked at a range of things. The title of the report is called Advancing LGBTQ plus Justice and Transgender Advocacy. So we're seeing here they're pushing this trans ideology, which ChatGPT apparently seems to struggle with, according to Brian's investigation. This was 58 pages of looking at the trans ideology, the so-called justice, which, considering what I've been doing with the Fornethy survivors and other abuse survivors, it actually seems to be very concerning to me, so that for those of us who have experienced abuse in our past, regardless of who you are, what kind of abuse it is, that seems to be, as we've seen with Patricia Robertson, not necessarily as important as making sure that we're using the right pronouns for people who somehow believe that they are able to change from male to female or binary or female to male or whatever they think they want to be doing. So some of the things also that was included in addition to this pronoun guide was some information from Cornell University. They have a transgender guide to transitioning and gender affirmation in the workplace, telling people how to transition at work, explaining a transgender inclusive health insurance plan, which is concerning in America because most people can't even get basic things done, gender-friendly toilets, voice and communication modification program. So if you need to sound more non-binary or more masculine or feminine. They talk about HR guidelines. So our favorite department, Human Resources, workplace transition plan, and how HR representatives and supervisors can work with a member of staff to transition as they feel comfortable to do so within the workplace, which is interesting considering that people like David Cartland and myself and many others have been canceled by the people related to HR departments because we were not holding the right views, essentially, which is what happened to me and to many others who are experiencing this in academia and other places in the moment. They have a level of expressions of oppression, which talks about different types of oppression and an expressions of oppression exercise that staff have to do when they attend this training, looking at different types of bias and what we need to do to achieve social justice through critical race theory, which is essentially the destruction of what exists currently in society. There is also a report from the Transgender Law Center that is written for transgender youth, so to speak, called Building Our Queer with a Race, Class, Gender Narrative, which says, for example, along many other things, we should say our genders or genders, be plural, instead of just gender, singular, because pluralizing genders enables greater agreement with our worldview and helps activate more expansive attitudes towards our genders, plural again, and transgender people. So I just wanted to highlight this because of what you were doing, Brian, but also just to show the sort of the hypocrisy that's going on in the world right now, that we're supposed to make these people who believe they can somehow magically change their sex despite Supreme Court rulings and so on. But then we see true abuse survivors who have been through horrible crimes in their lives and they cannot get justice, but we're supposed to provide justice for the people who decide that they are able to do this and want to do this, Brian.
Diane, absolutely. And we can be sure that the AI trainers, the people creating these AI systems, are absolutely going to be introducing that bias into the systems in order to keep pushing this agenda. And as we've seen on the BBC today from Australia, bans on children using social media. And of course, whilst there is some terrible things on social media which children shouldn't really be seeing, of course, what we can now see coming through the pipeline is stop the children having a different source of learning to the mainstream agenda, and they will then become young adults with absolutely no concept that there's any other form of fact or truth but that which comes from governments, AI systems, and the BBCs. We'll do more on this in extra, but let's finish with a little bit of a wry look, Ben, at, well, what is it? Is it the Looney Left or something different?
Yes, well, we've talked a bit about Zach Polanski recently, the new leader of the Green Party, but he's not the only left-wing firebrand on the block. Let's have a listen to Zara Sultana talking about nationalising the entire economy.
the status quo in this country is broken. We are the second most unequal country in the OECD, second to the US. We have rampant inequality, so things have to fundamentally change. And when I talk about nationalising our economy, I'm talking about the commanding heights of our economy. I'm talking about the utilities, energy, rail, buses, telecoms, mail, which are wildly popular with the public. But we also have to look at other forms of democratic ownership in our economy. That means workers' cooperatives, that means community land trust, that means public banking, that means a national welfare, or a wealth fund that workers and our communities control.
So do you mean that a corner shop or a hairdresser is going to be run by a workers' committee? I'm just trying to understand what this would actually mean.
If you look at polling, the British public actually support a system where workers make the decisions in their workplaces rather than a CEO. So when you've got a coffee shop and you've got a small workplace, a democratic form of ownership of that is a workers' cooperative, where workers own the shares in that company, they have better terms and conditions, the profits are shared amongst the workers, and that is a form of democratic ownership that does very well across the world, including in the UK in many cases.
And would that be something that businesses had to become? Would that be mandatory?
Well, these are conversations that we should have about what forms of ownership we should have in our economy. And right now, we don't have very many democratic forms of ownership. When we look across Latin America, you've got workers' cooperatives, you've got community land trusts, you've got all of these different forms. We need to have conversations about how we can democratise our economy.
But also mandatory might be an option.
It has to be something that we have a conversation about. Obviously, the party does not have policies yet, but it's important that we articulate a different vision of society.
Well, there you have it. Democratise the economy.
I know. What does that mean?
We'll talk about this in Extra.
Yes.
But you've got another one, haven't you? Let's end.
We do, yeah. Well, we'll talk about it a lot more in Extra. I think the main thing for me with her, this issue generally is that she's half right and half wrong. What she's right about is that there are gross levels of inequality and there are things that need to be changed in the economic system. What she's wrong about is what we should actually do about it. Big question with Sultana and your party, which she's the co-founder of, is can we possibly trust these people? I mean, she's done some extraordinarily disruptive and out of control things over the past few months in terms as relates to the management of your party, her party. But also we then end up seeing things like this coming from the Your Party conference over the past couple of weeks. Have a look at this.
My name's Claire. I'm from Dartford, Your Party. I'm also a member of Socialist Alternative. I want to speak for the name Our Party, not because I think it's a particularly good name, but because I think this should be our party. And the reason why we're having this debate now on the agenda, when we've been given 4 options, none of which were particularly popular as far as I could see, is because there were amendments that were submitted by hundreds of members all around the country, which talk about the issues which people on this conference floor wanted debated, amendments which have been silenced because they call into question an unelected clique who have been brought in and who have been doing damage to this party. Earlier, we heard discussion about the potential damage, the Red Scare of left-wing groups, of the people who have been on the streets, building front.
So can you imagine that? So they had that literally. So she's dissenting. They pull the plug, cut the feed.
She's gone.
She's gone. But can you imagine trying to run a business like that?
We'll talk about this in UK Column Extra. We must end today's news. I think it's been a really important news. Something very, very dark and controlling is installing itself in UK. We need to see it. We need to identify it. We need to call it out. We need to keep a sense of humour. And we need to ridicule these people because ridicule is a powerful weapon. We're going to end today's news there. If you're a member of UK Column, please join us in a few moments for UK Column Extra. For the others out there, UK Column News will be back at 1 o'clock on Wednesday. See you then. Thank you. Bye-bye.